When it comes to fantasy football, what would you prefer? A player on your roster that you can just pencil in for 12 plus fantasy points per game, or a player that can go out there and put up 30, but can also go out multiple times a year and put up single digits? Because I know we all love those huge blow-up games, but man, those single-digit games from high-performing studs are an absolute headache.
I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today. We're going to be talking about a few players that at year's end are high-end fantasy producers. However, they're a little bit boom or bust when it comes to their weekly performances. Now, when I say that, the first guy that comes to mind is Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. And when I say that, it really has everything to do with San Francisco just having so many high-end options on their offense that Deebo Samuel can't be utilized consistently week in and week out. Now, he still finished as the wide receiver 12 overall in 2023, and he averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game. But Deebo Samuel had over 30% of his season-long scoring racked up in just 2 games last year in 2023, and I mean that literally. Deebo scored 64.3 fantasy points in just week 13 and 14 alone. 64.3 points in 2 games. He only scored a total of 213.7 points on the season. He had 5 finishes inside the top 10 wide receivers on the year, but he also had 6 finishes outside the top 30 at the position. We already know that Deebo isn't the most durable wide receiver in the league. He has never played a full season in his career, and his rush attempts, which really carried him to a big 2021, have decreased every year since then. He just doesn't get many looks deep down the field. He was ranked as the wide receiver 82 in deep targets just last year. He just relies heavily on yards after the catch, which is something that he's been great at his entire career, but it's also the reason that he gets banged up so often. His ceiling is so high, you can't afford to sit him if you own him. And if you draft him, you're having to draft him so early that he's a big part of your fantasy team. As of right now, his estimated ADP is the end of the 2nd round. Now, I don't expect a huge game every single week from the players on my roster, but to finish outside the top 30 more times than inside the top 10 is really hard to accept when you're having to pay that hefty price tag. At the end of the season, he's going to score his points, and he's going to be great for your team 5 or 6 times a season. But every single week, you're going to throw him into your fantasy roster and just be terrified that he's going to put up single-digit fantasy points like he did 6 times just last year. Now, if you just heard single digits and you got immediate anxiety, I have something that could help you there. It's called hitting the like button right this second. When these videos get more likes, YouTube pushes more viewers our way. More viewers equal Jake getting to keep his job, which in turn leads to me dropping straight on a weekly basis. But anyway, next guy is A.J. Brown, Philadelphia Eagles. Talk about a tale of 2 seasons here. He absolutely just put your fantasy team on his back and carried them to start the season. Then you got to the fantasy playoffs, and he straight up stuck it to you, if you know what I mean. Because we don't forget that unbelievable hot streak that he had to start the season. He had 6 straight games of over 125 yards receiving. Through the first 10 weeks of the year, he was the wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy football and only trailed Tyreek Hill. But from weeks 11 on, he was the wide receiver 32 overall and was outscored by the Rams' Demarcus Robinson during that stretch. His start to the season was just so good, though, that he still ended up finishing as the wide receiver 7 overall on the season. He had 6 100-yard receiving games in the first 8 weeks of the year. However, only had 1 100-yard receiving game over his last 9 games played. He really killed people during the fantasy playoffs. 1/3 of his season-long scoring also came in just 3 games last season. They're still in an offense full of offensive weapons, and now they've added Saquon Barkley to the mix. Plus, A.J. Brown, he's still super expensive on draft day, estimated as a late first-round pick as of right now. I really don't see how things are going to be much different in 2024 than what they were in 2023. Sure, A.J. Brown may go full diva again, but either way, these up and down games are a huge headache. Now, one of the best ways to avoid those fantasy headaches is getting yourself a 2024 fantasy football draft guide. It's available right now on tfhdraftguide.com. All the information you need to straight up mushroom stamp your league mates in 2024. Maybe you want one for free though. That's an option. You can sign up for a new account over on Underdog Fantasy using the referral code Headliners when you do so. Once you make your minimum $10 deposit, you're going to get a first-time deposit bonus of up to $250 in bonus cash. Plus, I'm going to send you a free draft guide. The links to all that are down below in the description. But anyway, all right, next guy, it's Mark Andrews, tight end of the Baltimore Ravens. And really, when I look at Mark Andrews, I kind of consider him to be the Deebo Samuel of the tight end position because he had one great year and people have been overpaying ever since. Did you know only one time in the last 6 years has he gone over 855 yards receiving? Did you know only one time in 6 years has he gone over 75 catches? Did you know only one time in his career has he had double-digit touchdowns? His production is just boom or bust weekly. His receiving yards per game have now decreased in 3 straight seasons. He has a hard time staying healthy and on the field. The only place he does stay is on the injury report. Half the time, you don't even know if he's going to play or not. But he continues to be drafted highly because the tight end position in fantasy football was a wasteland for so long. But is the tight end position in fantasy football still a wasteland? With the addition of guys like Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson. What about the reemergence of guys like Evan Ingram and David Njoku? New rookies like Brock Bowers. This position is nowhere near as bad as it used to be. But yet, despite all that, Mark Andrews is still sitting at the tight end 4 overall for so many people. Now, on average, the tight end 4 scores 162.7 fantasy points per season, which means Andrews is going to have to be right around 60 catches for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, aside from what we saw from Mark Andrews back in 2021, that stat line is not easy for him whatsoever, especially with the likes of Isaiah Likely being just behind him, and he's no slouch. Zay Flowers, he showed promise late in 2023. He could have a huge role entering this season. They just drafted Devontae Walker. Don't forget that Derrick Henry, he's now in the backfield. He's going to soak up a lot of volume in that offense, and I know a lot of people are starting to talk about Rashad Bateman once again. This is the year he's finally going to put it together. While that remains to be seen, he's still another guy in the mix that's going to take away some targets. Mark Andrews is no longer the only option in Baltimore like he used to be, and he is still too damn expensive on draft day. Personally, I would rather draft Dalton Kincaid, who's currently ranked behind and being drafted later, than Mark Andrews. The last thing you want to do is draft players that you just regret all year long. You have to stress each and every week whether or not these guys are going to show up or not. Now, of course, when they pop off and they're matchup winning. The problem is they can disappear a lot and absolutely tank your season if it happens too many times. Now, a rule that I like to follow in fantasy football is this: I'll take one risk every 4 rounds. But most of these guys are going within the first 4 rounds of fantasy football drafts. The last thing I want to do is fill my roster with this much weekly risk. Now, if you agree with that, do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We got you covered with all things fantasy football all year long, and we're bringing home all kinds of trophies in 2024. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.
Analytics, off the chain, all the challenge.